So what are some signs that people should look out for that their shoes are dead?
There is a quintessential test that is taught at university called the dead shoe test. It's just a compression one end of the shoe to the other. You just want to make sure there's no...
Tell us a bit more about bunions. What should they be looking for in footwear in terms of giving them a comfortable existence with that bunion?
Finding the right fit for the shoe for the foot, and then obviously shoe for purpose as well too. Those things sort of go hand in hand in terms of creating a bit of stability there.
For everyone, their first toe isn't always their longest toe. So it's important, therefore, if you're checking the size of your shoes or the size of your children's shoes, that you're actually...
Welcome to the Comfort Walk and Talk, where every step towards comfort is a step towards a healthier you.
We're your hosts,
Jeff
Alana
And Ben.
Together, let's transform our lives from the ground up. Welcome, Jason and Sophie.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
We're going to talk about a topic that's dear to our heart and talk about some of the reasons why fitting and issues happen and why it's really important to get the right and correct pair of shoes.
So what are some signs that people should look out for that their shoes are dead?
Well, there is a quintessential test that is taught at university called the dead shoe test, which is a very, very, very important and easy test to do. That's just a compression one end of the shoe to the other, and you just want to make sure there's no inversion in terms of the flexion, only flexes at one point. So that is taught to professionals as a very, very simple starting point. Overall, though, if people are coming through and they're talking to us or even making inquiries, if we've got a family at work and then the parents are asking us about those sorts of things on their own behalf as well too, a lot of it we sort of say to them comes down to feel as well.
Yep.
So what the shoe feels like, it's lost that initial illustrious sort of cushioned impact and effect with itself, and basically you can then start to see those wear patterns creating those angles, whether they're on the outsole, as we talked about before, with that camber and angle, or whether or not it's even just through the thickness of the midsole as well too.
Do you need any tools to do this dead shoe test, or is it something by hand?
Just two workable hands.
Yeah.
Very good.
I don't know if you want to touch that, Ben. But you can do that yourself at home. Pretty much like if you grab the front and the end of the shoe and you're flexing it, you want to make sure it's still only flexing at the ball of the foot.
Yeah.
So
Is that fine?
That's working.
We're good.
That's good.
Still
It's
good.
good shoe.
It's good.
Yeah, nice.
That's
There
what
you
we
go.
Vintage shoe.
and you want to make
Comfort
sure
Co, we
it's
build
not,
them strong.
you want to make sure it's not flexing like the whole way through, like the middle of the foot. If you think of how your foot flexes, we bend at the ball of the foot, right? We can't, in the middle of our arch, bend our foot. So a shoe should do the same kind
So
of thing.
that's why podiatrists pick up the shoe and do the big U.
And give it a test, and they're
I
doing the
wonder why
dead
they
shoe test. And similarly, you can
There you go,
twist
guys.
you can
Giving away all
twist
the
the shoe as well. And twisting it checks it for like
When I first saw
torsional.
that, I'd say, "Hey, leave my shoe alone, please." Don't.
You good? We good?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Lovely.
testing it for like torsional stability. So is it still relatively stable in that plane as well? Like So another one you can do.
So
at home.
twisting topics a bit, because another thing that I saw when I was in Singapore
what you did there.
was every second lady, well, more than that, was coming up and they had a bunion, right? And they were going, and they were sort of, sometimes they were going, they were sort of trying to hide their bunion or whatever. But tell me a bit more. Is it? I hear sometimes a bunion is because of shoe, or is it they born with it, or does everyone grow into it? Tell us a bit more about bunions, because that has a big impact. We
On
all
your
know
shoes.
on the shoe that
Yeah.
we can people can buy.
Yeah, it's a very common complaint, unfortunately, with lots of genetic predisposition. So there is very much that genetic undertone associated with its presentation. We would even see at the clinic onset for juvenile, what we call HAV, which is a bunion, and that can oftentimes be occurring in children as young as 8 or 9 years of age as well too, with early signs. Lots of times we think that there's very much a tendency towards a hereditary pattern as well too. So you see it across generations within families too, but then it'll affect people in different ways as well. You might have siblings, 2 sisters, who have completely different presentations for it, but the tendency for the genetic pattern for that to occur. So when you say the shoe creates the bunion or the bunion's created by outside of those sorts of factors, then oftentimes what ends up happening is they're interrelated because people are wearing shoes all the time. So once the bunion starts, the wrong shoe or wrong features within the shoe can facilitate and just accelerate
some of the
that
dress
process.
shoes angle the toe in, don't they, to a point? Does
They
that
do,
Yep.
and they just don't help at all. So whether the shoe is primarily responsible in people of a generation where they blame those sorts of shoes that they were wearing at a very young age, we probably don't necessarily know as much as we want to about the effect of those sorts of shoes, but we definitely know that they're not going to be necessarily beneficial in that way for them as well too. And then over time, it just becomes more often than not quite painful and quite stiff. And then again, that's limited by the amount of shoes that are going to be comfortable and then the positive effects that people are going to get from those shoes. Small ill-fitting issues become big issues for them.
Do people operate? Do people operate on the bunion or?
Yeah, all the time. It's very much, I would say, the bastion for lots of foot and ankle surgeons. Would be people going through and talking to them about obviously what they would do, how their bunions have arisen, and what they would do with those bunions as well too. Most of the surgeons will ultimately talk to patients about exhausting their conservative options, which then becomes footwear and becomes what they're doing with their podiatrist, and then just becoming a little bit educated and aware of what things work best for them as well too.
So what should they be looking for in footwear in terms of giving them, a comfortable, existence with that bunion?
Yeah, well, very much coming back to one of the points we made before, finding the right fit for the shoe for the foot, and then obviously shoe for purpose as well too. Those things sort of go hand in hand in terms of creating a bit of stability there. Oftentimes they'll want to explore accommodating for the shape of their foot as well too, so they'll be looking for width within the shoe and then softer materials that allow for accommodation at the front of the foot as well too.
Yeah, and often with those, the people that usually complaining about bunions are going to be the women or men, in their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's less so do we see it in younger age groups. So by that stage, you've got to also think that the bones and ligaments and everything stopped growing.
Yeah.
So what you're trying to do, it's not like it's all soft tissue that's still growing that you can reposition and so forth. What you're really trying to do is accommodate what's already happened and what's there. So it's there. We're not going to change it, but we're going to make you as comfortable as possible. So how do we make you as comfortable as possible? Well, let's find a shoe that's, not going to exacerbate things, not be too narrow and too tight across the forefoot. If we can find a shoe that's got lots of adjustability across the forefoot, great. So if it's a sandal for women, then, rather than having like a fixed, might look really lovely and a nice little fancy fixed front, but what would be a lot better and more comfortable for your foot, of course, is going to be something with a nice adjustable Velcro strap at the front, and just trying to accommodate what you've already got there. And then it generally is like the people that can't get comfortable in their footwear that might end up at a podiatrist, whereby we're trying to work with orthotics and things as well and incorporating them into the shoe or into the sandal to really get, optimal comfort for them.
Yeah.
The good news is, listeners, you can have both. The Comfort Code.
So, high arch, right? Does that affect the footwear, or is it just they need a different arch support, or do they need a different shoe, or how does that affect?
Yeah, lots of times it's both of those things, Jeff. Oftentimes a different sort of a shoe will allow for just a little bit more, we keep coming back to the term, I suppose, for adults, is accommodation.
Yeah.
So a high bridge or a high arch through the foot just generally requires more depth within the shoe, so that you're getting coverage of the shoe on the foot as well too. Lots of times, once that occurs, then you've got better control for the difference, I suppose, with a high arch foot, which is a slightly wider forefoot and a slightly more turned in, narrower heel. And that can be really difficult to fit sometimes for some people as well, because you've got two opposing things happening at two different ends of the feet as well. But the main feature we find is once we start with a shoe with more depth, then the rest of those other features fall into place for them as well too. Now, those people aren't really going to benefit as much from, obviously, an increase in arch support that someone with a flatter foot's going to. Oftentimes that can exacerbate their position and just make things a little bit worse for them, a little bit more difficult in terms of their movement as well too. But depth generally becomes one of those precursors that we're always looking for.
And a high arch foot is probably the more difficult foot, would you agree, to fit, more so than a flat foot. A flat foot you can generally get into a lot more shoes.
Yes.
And you're looking for different features, but a high arch foot can be difficult to find a shoe that is deep enough that will accommodate.
Because they're not wide, are they? They're not. They don't have a wide front.
We often need a wider front and adjustability over that mid part of the shoe, like through the vamp of the shoe, having adjustability there as well.
Yeah.
Because, often, like a lot of people they might say, I've got a really high instep or high bridge or something like that. They might refer to it, but they can be really difficult to fit.
What sort of foot do you think is being has the least options for them on the market, or the ones that struggle to get footwear? What would you say? What's an example of people that are...
I'd probably have to say high arch
High arch
foot.
foot,
Yeah,
yeah.
it would be.
Probably.
I mean,
Maybe we should develop something.
well, yes, most definitely. That would make a lot of people happy, that's for
But
sure.
less people have the high arch
But
foot.
less people
so-
do, that's exactly right. So we'd say the much less, more, obviously commonly presenting sort of foot type, but the one that generally has just a few more of those potential issues associated with it as well too, which makes it a unique presentation more often than not. But yeah, we would sort of say more often than not, what we're looking to try to achieve from that fit aspect with the shoe is really just trying to accommodate for the depth, and then the rest of those other features fall into place.
And then that, conversely, that flat foot, they're more so looking for features to support their foot and keep it in the most neutral position possible. So with the flat foot, often we're looking for features like a nice closed-in heel counter, a nice firm closed-in heel counter, because if we can control the position of that rear foot, then we can keep that rear foot in a nice neutral position. So that will give them some options, as will, a lot of shoes will have just like some inbuilt arch support through the midfoot. That will help the people with flat feet as well. And, there's plenty of options out there as well for, supplementing or, popping in your orthotic or your insole to redistribute the pressure of that flat foot as well.
Do you do custom children's shoes? Have you had need to do, build-ups or stuff like that for children?
Yeah, it's a pretty common sort of practice that we have at the clinic, just because those sorts of options aren't really readily accessible for lots of families as well too. There are many fantastic pet orthotists and orthotists around in Queensland and in Australia as well too. But the sort of services, in terms of turnaround as well too, because those guys are so thin on the ground and so busy, makes it a little bit more difficult. So we do at our clinic, we do things a little bit differently. So we do some in-house modifications. We can be seen down in the lab cutting shoes open all the time and adding things to the actual midsole of the shoe as well too, if we don't necessarily feel like we can get the best amount of control within the shoe. So we sort of call those sorts of modifications extrinsic, outside the shoe modifications, as opposed to intrinsic, inside the shoe modifications. And in a lot of situations, children can benefit from that indefinitely, just by making that shoe more custom for them.
So nice that that's an option.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have been aware of
because
that.
so many families as well, like if you think of like custom footwear and so forth, you think, $500, $600, like really expensive, but you also think pretty daggy. Like some of the orthopedic footwear and things like that is not the best looking, right? So for those, not just kids, but like adults too, that if you can get away with an off-the-shelf shoe and with some modifications, then oftentimes that's enough. So if you can put them in, this shoe over here, but we need to sort of elevate to accommodate for a big limb length difference or something that they've got, and we can just slice that shoe open and build up however many mil inside there, they can still get around in a great looking pair of Asics joggers or whatever they want to wear and not sort of feel ostracized or different or left out or whatever, because they're still in otherwise normal footwear.
I mean, we say it quite regularly here. The healthiest pair of shoes on earth isn't going to do much good in the cupboard. So it's just about having people wear them, and that's why we're proud of what we do. Is we make those really nice looking shoes, the ones that you're happy to wear, that are also doing you a lot of good. So. I mean, I suppose with your kids, there's a bit more pressure on those brands and this and that and the other. Like I wouldn't be caught dead if it's not my Adidas's. I don't know what the kids are into these days. I guess I should probably learn, but that sort of thing. So knowing that you can slice them open and get a pair of shoes that kids will actually wear, that's good to know. I'll jot that one down for later.
Yeah.
Is leg length discrepancy, something that happens in children? I know that I hear it about in adults a little bit. Is that something you see a bit?
Yeah, incredibly common.
Yeah.
Not one of the most common presentations we'd see.
Look, it certainly is.
Is that right? One of the most common. And what sort of difference are you seeing?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, it's very much a can of worms, because there's just so much debate around, obviously, what the cutoffs are for, we would say, the magnitude of the difference really that's there. So orthopedic surgeons play their role when the magnitude of that difference gets very large. We would say generally over 3 centimetres, so 30 mils.
3 centimetres.
Which can happen. And there can be certain conditions as well that you would see in children that predispose them to that difference that's minor when they're younger, getting bigger and bigger and bigger as they progress in age as well too. But if we focus, I suppose, on the more common
Does
thing...
that mean if they walk, they keep walking in a circle?
By right of default, that ends up happening sometimes. There can be just variations in growth. You say to parents all the time that the only people we trust in terms of when the child is going to grow or is growing are generally the females within the family, female mentors, matriarchs, and then beyond that, they don't really know how much they're going to grow, and there's no rule around symmetry either. Those bone growth plates don't necessarily need to be as active. So generally we would assume one's underactive compared to the other, and that's what creates the little issue. And at our clinic, we would see a lot of children with anywhere between sort of like a 5 to 15 mil difference. That might be negligible in some children, but for a lot can be relative to what their problems are that they come and present to us with as well too. So then that becomes something we talk about managing, is that difference that's there as well. So for some people, it's completely negligible, and for some adults, obviously, that might be completely negligible. But at a clinic like ours, sometimes those things just need to be managed more so than anything to be able to help the children.
Just out of interest, what's the biggest leg discrepancy you've seen?
Over 5.5 centimetres.
Ooh.
2 inches.
So obviously that child was under advisement with a paediatric orthopaedic surgeon. We were just assisting in the process for them, but that was, incidentally enough, one of my first introductions to leg length discrepancy as well.
There you go.
Be very noticeable, I'd read.
Very, very noticeable, yes.
And you have to remember as well, these people that come in and end up seeing us, they've come in because something's wrong, or they've noticed something, or this, and that might be the underlying cause, and they don't realise it. There could be the limb length difference causing that issue, but they're coming in because there's something wrong. So I dare say if we all laid everyone down around here and measured everyone for limb length difference, probably like heaps of people are going to have one, like 5 mil, something like that. But it's not going to cause a massive issue for the vast majority of people. Do you agree with that, Jace?
Yeah, most definitely. Case in point right here as well too.
Yes. Do you have one?
Go.
Yep.
And in essence too, like the management for those sorts of things with adults and with children is vastly different as well too, because you're looking at much more long-term things for adults because there's no more growth that takes place beyond that skeletal maturity.
So you can affect maybe balancing it out with the child?
Oh, that would be lovely if we could do that. But no, you're
No.
sort of a little bit behest to their normal development overall, and that's why they're back in more regularly than some of the other children might be for reviews, just because you're simply monitoring that growth as well too.
Okay. In a magic world, if you could say what are the 1 or 2 things you'd like to see more in footwear that you don't see now, or you see occasionally, what would they be?
Am I going to start with this one? Okay. Yeah. Oh, I've never been asked that before, but that's a really good question. I'll start with adults footwear.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, from a bit of a selfish perspective too, if I were going to pick like the ultimate shoe and then I was picking like for myself, I'd just be trying to find, I guess, something that looks exactly how I want to look. So like before we were talking about what do all the kids want, like they want the Adidas, they want the whatever. So I'm just imagining like the perfect kind of trainerish, dress shoe-ish, but it's just like this little hybrid over here. So it looks exactly how I want it, but it's comfortable. So it's got all these features in it that they don't just look great, but then it's just got like the ultimate in terms of like support, comfort. Yeah, I don't know. That's where I'd be going if I was picking my like adult shoe for sure.
Funny you should say that. We're launching Mia Vita this afternoon.
Yes.
Stick around, have a look.
Over there. Yep.
Tick, 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 tick. There you go.
It is a mantra of ours, though, definitely. We realise that you have to look good.
100%.
The product has to look good.
Yeah.
Today, particularly the demanding consumer. But what you're saying is there's value in all those essential support features.
Definitely, because, as we were saying before, like with orthopedic footwear or just even like comfort footwear in general has a bit of a like the connotation associated with it that it's just going to look a little bit daggy at times, right? Like, if they feel good for me, then they're going to like look daggy. Do you know, like I'm sure like if I went out there and asked like plenty of my friends, probably, everyone we're at uni with and so forth, you don't want to like generally back then you didn't want to buy a comfort shoe because it just wouldn't like look as cool.
Orthopedic.
So,
Medical.
yeah. It
But
does
luckily, we've
have
got
that
people
look, right?
changing the guard.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Exactly
yeah.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because incorporating that sort of thing is, like it is, it's very important. It's the aesthetics versus the comfort. And they're two very, very
line.
difficult things to try to get right for
Exactly.
the grander population, particularly
Yeah.
over different age ranges as well too. So sometimes the best default is just trying to cram as many of those support features as you can into the shoe. The more supportive the shoe, generally the more comfortable the shoe.
Yeah.
And then people I've found in the past are just a little bit more lenient with regards to the aesthetics and the look of the
Yeah.
shoe if they know it's really, really comfortable for them as well too. I
feel
would say
like-
in adults.
Like Carrie Bradshaw has a lot to answer for. You know, they're squeezing a size 9 into a size 7 Milano Blanc. It was just the thing to be done in the early 2000s, wasn't it?
That's it.
It,
And I'm sure it did no favours.
Oh, I'm
either.
sure. I'm just curious with your guys' practice. Have you ever seen someone, like a patient, come in with foot issues and it's like, that's because you've been squeezing into some dumb shoes?
I had one like 2 weeks ago. I kid you not. And actually, it wasn't a patient, but just a customer. And the mum brought the little girl in and said, "Oh, I think like she's getting like pain under the balls of her feet." So she's like, "I don't know if I need to see a podiatrist or not, but she might need new shoes as well." I said, "Okay, well, let's just measure up first and have a look." Measured this child's foot up, and then I thought, and then I'm looking at the tongue of the shoe, and I'm thinking. I remeasured because I thought I've got to have this wrong because that shoe is so small.
No.
And 3 sizes we went
Wow.
up, 3 full US sizes, which is probably the equivalent of like 4 or even 5 in EU equivalent. So
Lord.
massive. And I said, look, here's what we're going to do. Let's start with the shoe. And if we get the right size shoe and you don't come back in the next couple of weeks, because I'm pretty confident you're not going to have any forefoot pain if you just get the right. Because the girl would have been like this inside these shoes, and the mum was really embarrassed and felt horrible. And the kid hadn't complained at all, apart from just my forefoot's really sore. So anyway, she hasn't been back. So I said, if the shoe does its job and you got the right size shoe, I have a feeling you're not going to need a podiatry appointment, and didn't need a podiatry appointment. So there you go.
I love what you said earlier on about the shoe should hold on to the foot and not the foot hold on to the shoe. I think that's a fantastic
Yeah, definitely.
statement
Yeah.
in terms of understanding.
That shoe was holding on for dear life.
That shoe certainly
Take
was.
some doing, like
Yeah.
grease up the side of your foot.
Yep.
Yeah,
It wasn't
imagine
doing
getting
any
that shoe on and
favours.
off.
Yeah.
Oh
Would have
my
been an effort
word!
within itself.
You hear like the big grunt after the end of the workday, you know, those ones. And
Trying to pull the shoe
you
off.
hear that from a 7-year-old, you know, something's not quite right.
That's exactly right.
But it's actually like, that's really common for parents to say, my child never complained, but they didn't say anything. Why didn't you say anything? You should have said something to me. Like, they so often say that. And the kid's just running around in these shoes that are like,
Because they look good, maybe.
maybe because they look good.
You know, they hold dear to the look.
Maybe. Not everyone has for everyone, their first toe isn't always their longest toe. So it's important, therefore, if you're checking the size of your shoes or the size of your children's shoes, that you're actually checking from the longest toe. And oftentimes that can, in fact, be the second toe. It could be a third toe as well. But just make sure you're always checking from that longest toe. So if that means putting your thumb in front of the longest toe and you want to be allowing for that 15 mils or good thumbs width, just keep an eye on the fact that you definitely are measuring from the longest toe, not just assuming it's always your first toe.
You might actually find that it's more important that you're having assessment of your shoes with expectations around having them replaced or at least even repaired sooner rather than later. Lots of occasions we're looking at growth and we're looking obviously then at wear patterns around that 4 to 6 month mark for active individuals, particularly if you're wearing your shoes any more often than potentially say 3 or 4 times a week for different sorts of activities.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much for the time today. It's really been good. I think we've given our audience a little bit more in-depth knowledge about some of the things you look at when it comes to fit.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks
for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on the Comfort Walk and Talk by the Comfort Co. If you like this episode and you got something out of it, we would love your support with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Don't forget to subscribe on your favourite channels and never miss a step on your journey to comfort.
Please follow us for more insights and updates on the Comfort Co social media channels. Until the next episode, see you later.